Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are stepping into what I think is literally one of the most vital roles in all of education, the student advocate. If you've ever looked at a student who is struggling and asked yourself, what else can we possibly do to help this learner succeed, then you are in exactly the right place. We're going to explore how to build a responsive teaching environment that guarantees every single learner continues growing. It's an incredibly empowering topic, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First, foundation of student learning. Second, support is not failure. Third, the 3 tiers explained. Fourth, monitoring for meaningful progress. And finally, a collaborative team effort.
Section 1. Foundation of Student Learning. Alignment and Backward Design.
Okay, so before we can even think about student support or interventions, we absolutely have to talk about curriculum alignment and backward design, right? Because effective teaching doesn't just begin when the kids walk into the room. It starts way before any classroom activities are even planned. To build that rock-solid foundation, we always begin with the end in mind. Planning starts right at the top with our standards, the TEKS, and flows naturally into our language standards, the ELPs. From there, we align with teacher standards like T-tests, we weave in technology and special education frameworks, and finally the whole shebang funnels directly into real student learning. Effective planning is really this beautiful intersection of all these instructional frameworks.
But as we plan, we really have to be careful to avoid what instructional designers call the twin sins. The first sin, activity-oriented teaching. This is where the focus is basically just on keeping students busy with fun tasks rather than making sure they're actually learning anything. The second sin is coverage without understanding. That's when we're rushing through the material just to check a box without pausing to see if the kids actually grasp the concepts. Listen, our planning absolutely must focus entirely on gathering real evidence of student learning.
Moving on to Section 2. Support is not failure. A mindset shift.
Now that our foundation is set, we really need to address a critical philosophical shift. I want you to treat this like a daily mantra, okay? Support is not something we do because students have failed. It is something we do because students deserve another opportunity to succeed. Just let that sink in for a second. Support is simply responsive teaching. When we offer a little extra time or try a totally different approach, that isn't a punishment for not getting it the first time. No way. It's our commitment to giving every single learner the exact environment they need to thrive. And this brilliantly illustrates how that mindset completely changes our approach. The old methodology? Well, that relied on intervention without monitoring. That's essentially throwing support at a student and just crossing your fingers, hoping it works. It's outdated guesswork, to be honest. But the new methodology is grounded in responsive persistence. We don't just intervene and walk away. We respond to the evidence, and we persistently adjust our methods until that student succeeds. It's a total game changer. Which brings us to Section 3, the 3 tiers explained, the MTSS framework. So, let's shift our focus to the actual architecture of this support. Imagine a teacher who has differentiated their instruction beautifully. Most of the class is growing, doing great, but one student just continues to struggle. That teacher has to stop and ask the million-dollar question, what have we tried and what should we try next? This is where we pivot from educational theory into active, on-the-ground instructional decision-making. Because while differentiation kicks off the work, it's MTSS that actually sees it through.
So what exactly is MTSS? It stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. Basically, it's a comprehensive framework ensuring every single learner gets the precise instruction and intervention they need to make meaningful progress. And here's the kicker. It is not some rigid tracking system where kids get stuck. It is super fluid, it's heavily informed by data, and it is inherently collaborative.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how these 3 tiers actually break down. Tier 1 is universal. This is your strong, high-quality foundational core instruction for literally everyone. Then there's Tier 2, which is targeted. This is where you bring in small group interventions, maybe some extra time and targeted evidence for students who just need a quick boost. Finally, Tier 3 is intensive. These are highly individualized interventions that usually mean collaborating with specialists. But the key word here is fluid. A student isn't a Tier 2 student. Rather, they're a student who currently happens to need Tier 2 support for a very specific skill.
But honestly, here's the absolute most crucial takeaway when it comes to these tiers. Strong Tier 1 instruction is the foundation of MTSS. Period. You literally cannot intervene your way out of poor core instruction. High-quality universal support, rigorous formative assessments, effective differentiation, all of that has to be happening every single day in Tier 1. Otherwise, the rest of the system just falls apart.
All right. Section 4, monitoring for meaningful progress. Okay, so you've aligned your curriculum, you've made the mindset shift, and your tiers are all set up. But this whole operation relies on one massive thing: constant observant feedback. As the saying goes, intervention without monitoring is guessing, and that is so true. Progress monitoring is literally the only way to know if our support is actually working. If we toss a student into a Tier 2 small group but we aren't tracking their data, we are flying blind. Simple as that.
Think of progress monitoring as a super active, dynamic life cycle. First, we collect evidence of learning. Second, we monitor the student's growth against our standards. Third, we adjust our support. Maybe they need more time, or hey, maybe they're ready to step right back into strictly Tier 1. And fourth, we celebrate that progress. This continuous cycle of improvement is exactly what keeps the learner moving forward.
Of course, finding that evidence means we have to look very, very closely at real classrooms through authentic observation. When we observe, we've got to analyze the Tier 1 supports that are already in place, interpret which students might actually benefit from Tier 2, recommend the next steps, and reflect on the evidence that drove our decisions. You're basically acting as an instructional detective.
And finally, Section 5, a collaborative team effort. Let's zoom out for a second from the individual teacher and look at the broader school ecosystem. Building a multi-tiered system of support? It takes a village. The diverse stakeholders required for a student's success go way beyond just the classroom teacher. It brings in interventionists, special education teachers, counselors, administrators, and, this is a big one, the students' families.
So, the crucial point is this: supporting students is a team effort. Moving from just being an instructional designer to a true student advocate means you never, ever work in isolation. You have to tap into the expertise of everyone in your building to make sure absolutely no student falls through the cracks. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to mull over. How is your thinking about student support changed? Think about your understanding of intervention, the role of collaboration, and how evidence drives your day-to-day decisions. Just remember, needing support is not a label of failure. It is the ultimate act of responsive teaching. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope you leave here feeling energized to apply these frameworks and advocate for every single learner in your school. See you next time.